There's been an interesting post going around lately on which of these players would get benched if they were all in their primes. These players being LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Steph, Shaq, KD, and Michael Jordan. So today, we're going to take a deep dive into each one of their primes to figure out the answer. And stay tuned because the final answer will surprise you 100%. Alright, so the first player we're going to start with is LeBron James. And I already know what some of you already may be thinking. This man is still in his prime, so which year will we be using for this video? Well, there's two options. James with the Miami Heat or 2018 LeBron with the Cavs. For this video, we're going to be using Miami LeBron for reasons we'll explain shortly. In 2011, as we all know, LeBron would make one of the biggest decisions in sports history. He would team up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh along with the Heat faithful and form one of the best trios the NBA has ever seen, with him being at the forefront. Offensively, he was completely unstoppable, averaging over 27 points per game in his 4 seasons with the Heat, shooting over 56% from the field in his last 2 years. In the 2013-14 season, LeBron shot a ridiculous 78% in the restricted area, which would have led the NBA if he would have attempted like 1 or 2 more shots. Nonetheless, while he's still at the top in terms of finishing percentages today, they still don't touch those from 2013. This year in 2024, he shot 73%, and in 2023, he shot 74% in the restricted area. That just goes to show you that LeBron was on another level when it came to driving to the basket back in his Miami Heat days. He is without a doubt the best driver of the basketball of all time. At 6'9" and weighing in at over 260 pounds, he could run like an NBA player, while also having the strength and agility of an NFL player. Not to mention, he could literally jump with his head way above the rim. There simply has never been another player more athletic in his prime than King James. Then, of course, he had an extremely polished post game where he could dominate with his back to the basket or facing up, which is literally a cheat code. If you want some perspective, that's like a player having the driving ability of Giannis while also having the post game of a bigger and stronger Kobe Bryant. Yeah, I know it's insane, but this is why he was so dominant. There was no defender who could stop him outside of maybe Kawhi Leonard. You had to double him. But of course, he's also an elite passer. He averaged over 6.7 assists per game in his Miami Heat career while not even being the primary point guard. But what really adds to the greatness of his prime was his defense. He was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate who many thought should have won it. This type of versatility had never been seen on both sides of the court at his size. However, no one is perfect. And at the end of each player segment, we will briefly mention the bad during their primes to make it easier to come to a final conclusion at the end on who needs to be benched. LeBron is amazing, but his free throw shooting and lack of a killer instinct definitely were the biggest drawbacks to his game. He was never necessarily a bad free throw shooter, but he wasn't a great one either. And then when it comes to a killer instinct, he just didn't have it compared to the others on this list. It's just facts. You can pull up all the clutch numbers you want, but when the game was on the line, he didn't strike fear into his opponents as much as a Kobe or Jordan. And NBA players will literally tell you that out of their own mouths. So yeah, that's the good and the bad for LeBron James. Miami Heat LeBron was one of the most complete all-around players ever. Next, we'll talk about Kobe Bryant, and the year we're going to be using for his best prime year is the 2005-2006 season, where he averaged 35 points per game while shooting 45% from the field, 34% from 3, and 85% from the line. We talked about how dominant James was in the paint, but in the mid-range, Kobe was just as dominant. During the 06 season, he was hands down the best mid-range scorer in the league. He was first in the NBA in mid-range shots made per game with 5.2, shooting 42%. These numbers are even more jaw-dropping when you consider the fact that he was always being guarded by the opposing team's best defender. And all of his mid-range shots were contested for the most part. Whether it was a 1-2 pull-up or a mid-range shot from a face-up, he could do it all. He could even back you down and get you leaning with his sweet footwork before turning over his shoulder and letting off a high-arcing post fadeaway. Watching his game is one of the most beautiful things you could ever witness. He could get to the hole, the mid-range, or if he was hot, he could hit a big 3 when his team needed it most. But what's most impressive is that he made the freaking all-defensive first team while averaging 35 points. Like, how is that even possible? That just goes to show you his mindset. He wanted to compete as hard as he could on both ends of the court every single possession. As far as his flaws, he didn't have any major ones. You could say he wasn't a great shooter, but that wasn't a flaw. He just was so good in the mid-range that he didn't need to shoot a bunch of threes. Not to mention, he was also one of the best finishers in the league that year too. In terms of mentality, he created the term Mamba mentality. So that should tell you everything there is to know about his killer instinct on the court. Third, we have Steph Curry, and the year we'll use for him is 2016, the year he was the unanimous MVP, averaging 30 points, 5 rebounds, and 6.7 assists per game while shooting an insane 45% from 3, which is just so damn crazy to say out loud. All I can do is laugh. 2016 Curry needs to be studied, that's for sure. He dominated the game differently than LeBron and Kobe. He was just as impactful as they were without even dribbling the ball. His off-ball movement is something that we won't ever see again in our lifetime. Watching him sprint around the court for 15 seconds before chucking up a logo 3 and hitting nothing but net was peak entertainment. He obviously still does it today, but 2016 was 8 years ago, believe it or not. So his legs and body were a lot fresher and faster, which made him twice as lethal than what he is today, if not more. Because of how great he was without the ball, it was impossible to guard him. Like, no, seriously, he couldn't be guarded. Because think about it, if you have a great scorer who ISOs a lot, then the best option is to throw your best on-ball defender on him, like a Kawhi Leonard. But no single defender, no matter how great, has the stamina and mindset to chase him around a bunch of hard bruising screens every possession for all 4 quarters. It's damn near impossible. We saw what happened to Cavs guard Matthew Dellavedova. In Game 3 of the NBA Finals, he had to go to the hospital after experiencing severe cramping and exhaustion after guarding Steph Curry all game. That just about sums up prime Steph. On the defensive end, he wasn't as bad as people made him out to be. At the very beginning, he wasn't very good. But around 2016 and 17, he was definitely still not great, but his team defense was pretty damn solid. Other than that, he didn't really have any other weaknesses. He was a good passer, shooter, rebounder for his size, and while he wasn't the clutchest statistically, during his prime, he was the last guy you wanted to leave open with time running down. And the same can be said about Michael Jordan. The entire 90s were his prime, but the year we'll use is the 1989-90 season, where he averaged 33 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and nearly 3 steals while shooting 52% from the field and 37% from 3. Just like LeBron, everyone has their own opinions on what year was their best. But this season, his numbers were off the charts, even more so than usual. We know what he was offensively. Arguably the best mid-range scorer ever, one of the greatest finishers ever, and despite what the media tells you, he was a hell of a passer. This was around the time he started to trust his teammates a lot more, which opened up his whole game. For the younger fans who didn't get to see him play, please go check out the full games. The highlights alone don't do him justice. It was like watching Kobe on steroids. He did everything Kobe did, but better. Even on the defensive end, MJ was a dog. And the funny thing is, Kobe and MJ were literally just defensive players who just so happened to be unstoppable on offense too. So that's why, despite how many points they were scoring, they were still making all defensive teams and locking down their opponents. Just like Kobe, Mike had the ultra killer instinct. The only player today who has a similar attitude and instinct to what Jordan had is Anthony Edwards. It's just so rare to naturally have that ability and be able to back it up. Next up, Shaquille O'Neal, aka the Big Diesel. He had some monster years, but the 2001 season took the cake. He averaged 28, 12, and 3 while swatting nearly 3 shots per game and shooting 57% from the field. Shaq has the title of the most dominant big man in NBA history, and rightfully so. We talked about what a freak athlete LeBron was, but Shaq is also in a room of his own. At 7'1", weighing over 300 pounds, he could move at speeds that didn't seem possible. Just look at these clips. The man was well over 300 pounds moving like that. It simply was unfair. Like, how do you even stop that? He was a post-scoring nightmare who could also rebound like a madman, and defensively, while he wasn't as impressive as Mike, Kobe, or even 2013 LeBron, he still was an elite shot blocker. However, you can't mention Shaq without talking about his poor free throw shooting and poor shooting in general. During that 2000 season, he shot less than 52% from the free throw line, which, believe it or not, actually wasn't even the worst free throw shooting year of his career. And then now lastly, we have KD. In the 2013-14 season, the OKC forward was named the regular season MVP, averaging 32, 7, and 5 while shooting 50% from the field, 39% from 3, and 87% from the line. Either this season or his time in Golden State could be considered the best version of himself. And honestly, the more I think about it, the best version of KD was definitely in Golden State. There, he continued to be an unstoppable offensive force, but he would also become an elite defender, averaging nearly 2 blocks per game in the 2017-18 season, even getting some Defensive Player of the Year votes. There wasn't a defender on the planet who could guard him, and you can't say that about a lot of players. And so, there you have it. That brings us to our big decision. Out of LeBron, Steph, Kobe, Shaq, Jordan, and KD, who would be the one getting benched? And the answer is, drumroll please, Shaquille O'Neal. Yeah, I know that may shock some people, but hear me out. In terms of flaws and weaknesses, he has the most of them. And again, he's clearly the most dominant center in NBA history, but when comparing all-time great basketball players, you have to factor in versatility and expandability within offense. And to a certain extent on defense too. Just think about it. You can throw any of those 4 on any team and they would thrive due to how impactful they were without the basketball. That's why KD did so well in Golden State despite playing alongside 3 other players who either had the ball in their hands a lot or shot up a lot of shots. He played better while taking less dribbles and with a point guard setting him up. Shaq, on the other hand, needs the ball in his hands in order to be great. And yeah, he did play with Kobe, but playing with 4 other superstars is different than just one. So in this scenario, I think he's the odd man out for that reason. But let me know in the comments who you would bench. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.